And we are recording. Mr. Elliott Hulse, welcome to the World Class Dads podcast.
Thanks for having me.
Dude, I'm excited to connect. I've been seeing your content for a long time, following you on the socials, checking out some of your videos, and they seem to have transformed a little bit over the years. I remember used to pull up your stuff and figure out how to get jacked, and now you're talking a lot more philosophically, talking about manliness, masculinity, being a man, being a father, all these things. So I thought, what better person to bring on the show to talk about fatherhood than you? So I'm excited that we have a chance to connect here.
Thanks. Yeah, that's great.
So for the folks who are listening who don't know you, who maybe don't follow you or haven't seen your content, would you mind just sharing a little bit about your professional background and kind of what your businesses are around and kind of what led you to this point today?
Well, I'm a strength coach. I teach men how to grow stronger. Started training athletes out of the back of my van in 2007. And in order to build up my clientele of athletes, and it also turned out to be a lot of their dads wanted to train with me too, because they saw what we were doing, which was pretty cool. I don't want to say I popularized, but I was definitely one of the first people doing strongman training in fitness. And so a lot of the dads, they saw us like flipping tires and pushing trucks, so they wanted to get involved. So I was training a lot of young men and their fathers, interestingly enough. Anyway, so I started making YouTube videos in order to help promote the camp, strength camp. And by and by, those videos that I was using mainly to promote myself locally, so the guys could just share the videos with their friends, and then I get more clients, started to gain some attention worldwide, and it really wasn't my intention. Of course, when you're training young men and you gain their trust, because you help them get stronger, jump higher, run faster, look more jacked, burn some fat, as is with most people, they would then trust you with other things. And so the conversations would often expand. After the end of the workout, we would talk about school and parents and girlfriends and career and things of that nature. And I enjoyed those conversations just as much as I enjoyed the conversations about lifting. And just as my lifting channel was starting to gain traction on YouTube, and I got to about 1 million subscribers, over 1 million subscribers in 2014. I started receiving questions online from young men that revolved around life, the same as the one in my, at my gym. So anything related to, again, girls, women, school, career, parents, things of this nature. And apparently they liked hearing me talk about that stuff too. So I started a second channel that's, right now it's like 800,000 subscribers. So apparently young men like hearing what I have to say as it relates to growing stronger. And that makes perfect sense because I'm a strength coach.
Yeah, that's awesome. And speaking of the kind of other areas of life, the more general perspective of life, can you tell me a little bit about your family life, when you got married, how many kids you have, when your kids started showing up in the picture, when you started having kids?
Well, the first blessing I have in my life is that I have two parents. And I have a father, which I've discovered is quite a unique thing these days.
Yeah,
Not only that,
unfortunately.
but I have a strong father, right? So he was there, he was present, but who's also very active in our lives. In a way that I didn't even understand when I was younger, because I grew up in this effeminate world where strong men are seen as toxic. And my dad, if you want to use that term, it was definitely toxic. And it was a blessing as a result. I couldn't see that until I was an adult, and when I had my own children, and I realized my father's strong sense of boundaries and discipline, and the things that he preached and showed us was such a blessing in my life. I met my wife when we were in high school. We started dating, I guess you could call it, because we were like 15 years old, right? So we were kids, and we started dating, and we stayed together all through high school, all through college. I married her when I turned 23. We had our first child at age 24. I have 4 children now, and I just turned 42. So I've been with this woman like my entire life. I love her more now than ever before. It's amazing.
That's awesome. I love that story. And so it sounds like, math's not my strong suit, but you already had kids at the point of launching Strength Camp. Is that right?
I guess I had my second daughter right around the time that I started strength camp.
Okay. Do you remember what that feeling was like as a dad, just getting a business off the ground, trying to provide and for your family and support them while you're building this thing up from the ground up, literally from the van up?
So I have a funny story about that where I was training a bunch of guys. At this point, I think I had moved strength camp into a warehouse, just a garage roll up door, and that was it. I threw my stuff in there, and all of my children were born at home. Me and my wife believe in natural childbirth, natural parenting, and so we don't go to the hospital. We have the children at home. And so when my daughter was being born while I was working, it was in the middle of a class. I was in the middle of training a group of guys, and they laugh at me now, but it just made to me it made sense to ask them for permission. I was like, "Hey guys, my daughter's about to be born. Would you be willing to finish this workout on your own?" Because my house was, maybe about 10-minute drive away. While I go and catch the baby, so my wife doesn't have to do it by herself. And so they laughed. It was like, "Of course, go get out of here."
Get the
And
hell
so I
out of here, man.
rushed home real quick, and within a matter of minutes, all my babies came quick. All my wife, she just pushes them right out. As soon as they're ready, it's like, "All right, they're coming." And so, I got there in the nick of time, washed my hands, changed my shirt, and boom, here's this baby. So that was, I guess that story is indicative of the type of, what my life was like at that time.
That's awesome. So my wife, we have one right now. She had the baby at the hospital, but did it all natural, no drugs. And
Nice.
she's interested in doing a home birth next time, which makes my palms sweat thinking about like me being the guy there. So I'm gonna have to call you up if we go down that route, get some pointers since you've done it now 4 times.
Mhm.
So as you're I'm just trying to get into your head as you're building a business and now you're Elliott Hulse, the guy with 2 million YouTube subscribers and a huge following, but at that time you're just trying to prove this thing out. Was that from the business side stressful for you to while you're trying to figure out what the business looks like, what the content piece of it looks like? You've got 2 kids at home and you're just really trying to create this thing at that time, or where's your head at and what's your mindset like at that stage in life?
Well, you got to remember, it was also during the last financial collapse.
Yeah, that's that's,
So
that's a good point.
I'm building a business. At the same time, everyone is losing their jobs, they're losing their pensions, and then the housing market crashed. So I
Mm,
was upside down on a mortgage. I moved from New York to Florida, and I figured, okay, I'll buy a condo. It's a better price here in Florida. Paid $150,000 for it. Couldn't even sell it for 40. So I mean, and then I was also $90,000 in debt because there was a point where we were using credit cards to buy food, toilet paper. And so I was deeply in debt, upside down on a mortgage, financial collapse. It was a tough time, but I tell you that I thrive best under that kind of pressure.
mm,
And I think that's the fact that I was thrown into that hot boiling waters what allowed me to gain the momentum that I needed in order to, continue. I can tell you this right now. I'm happy I did that when I was in my early 20s because I don't
mm.
think I have the energy to do that right now. It's just not, physically and maybe even mentally, my mind is just not there. And that's why I really believe that it's best for young men to put themselves under that pressure at an early age, regardless of what it is you choose to do. It is definitely not the time to be playing video games,
Mm.
feeding off to porn and smoking weed. It's better at that time in your life to bust your butt getting done what you need to get done early, so that like me, I mean, I'm not retired, but by the time I was 35, it was like, okay, I can kind of breathe a little bit and
Mm.
relax. And a lot of guys, that's when they're just trying to get their ball rolling.
Right. Yeah, you could put it on cruise control a little bit more. Do you feel like you did a good job during that time of still balancing family and being there for your family while maintaining, the high growth of the business and the attracting the YouTube subscribers and all of that during that time?
Well, I believe that balance doesn't look like balance in the moment.
Hmm.
I don't believe that there's a true balance in the moment. I think that balance develops itself over time. And when the children are young, they don't need me.
Mm.
The world has us believe that we need to be Mr. Mom and that we need to be there changing diapers and that we need to be there just like the mommy feeding the baby. And that's just has not been my experience. And I don't believe that's true. I believe that when the children are small, they need their mother. They need their mother, in a world where, again, they're trying to teach us to be more effeminate, right? But at the same time, they teach the women to get out there and be career women. So you got the baby that nobody's caring for. The mother's got to go
Mm.
out. She's got to work. The dad, of course, he's been working. That's his job anyway. But then, this pressure to, like, again, be Mr. Mom. Uh, I think where it balances itself out, to answer your first part of that, was no, I was totally not in, I was not balanced at all. I was working from 5, get to the gym at 5 o'clock in the morning. I'm there till 9 o'clock at night sometimes. I'd
Hmm.
come home for lunch and I would see my children just for, and I would take a nap and they would nap on me. They would sit on me while I was taking a nap, and then I'd be out the door once again. So it was totally imbalanced. They didn't spend a lot of time with me, but now that they're teenagers, they're
Mm.
becoming teenagers, I am like white on rice with them. They're sick of me. They wish I wasn't around so much because I'm always chastised and I'm always telling that's wrong. You can't do that. Look at just because the world is telling. So I think where it balances itself out is where now they need me more. I think the children need the fathers more when they start being exposed to the world, and the father now has to mediate that.
When do you feel like for you that kind of transition happened, when you felt it was time for you to start having a more active role in their lives and kind of their upbringing? What do you have a sense of kind of roughly what age that is for them that you felt that you need to get more involved?
Probably when my oldest daughter was, between 10 and 12,
Mm.
right? She grew up pretty quickly and she was going through, she's great now, she's 16, but she kind of went through a what a tip, she grew up fast. She's when she was born, and when she was very young, we took her to, get tested or whatever. And they said that this child's IQ is so high that she's going to have some issues. It's going to be a challenge
Wow.
for her. And so we recognized it really quickly that, like, socially she was having some problems. And so that was the time that I had to step in with my oldest daughter, and I had to, it was no longer mommy's nurturing wasn't good enough. It was, okay, you need daddy's boundaries now. And so my each child is different though. Also, like my middle daughter, I haven't really had to step in for her at all. But my third
Mm.
daughter, she's she's turned 12, and I'm like, oh, now, like, she's showing signs of that I have to be there. I can't let things slip. So it depends on the child, right? My
Mhm.
youngest is 10, and I'm like, and that's my son, and I'm like, I'm waiting for him to show me where I need to step in, but he's just so cool, he's so laid back that, I'm gonna have to step in whether he likes it or not, or gives me reason to or not. And it's like, all right, here we go, son. Now you're gonna have to hang out with dad and figure some things out with me.
Yeah, you just used the word boundaries and daddy setting boundaries, and that being, I guess, one of the roles that you fulfill as a dad. What do you see as the other responsibilities as a father with their kids? Like, what structure or what are the responsibilities that we have as dads for our kids?
I was just listening to a YouTube video with Father Chad Ripperger, who's he's an exorcist. But he's an awesome guy. He's a tough
Hmm.
guy, really smart guy, and he was talking about the responsibility of the father to provide and to protect. And we tend to think of that in terms of, like, okay, well, so you make money and then you're going to help provide food and stuff, and then, physical protection, of course, I mean, if somebody breaks into the house. But he says that is only part of it. It's spiritual. There needs to be a spiritual provision, and there needs to
Mm.
be spiritual protection. Spiritual provision means you've got to teach your children the faith. You got to teach your children religion. You are the priest in the home. It is up to the father to decide when and how the family prays and worships. That's the providing. A father provides a faith for his family. And then also, again, spiritually, the protection is, praying protective prayers over your family. You know, keeping the demonic and diabolical forces and disorientation of this world at bay the best you can, but also praying in that way so that you can be the spiritual protector of your children.
Hmm. I heard you, as I was getting ready for this interview, I was doing my research and I saw some interviews with you and your dad. And so it's cool. You mentioned him earlier that he played a strong role in your upbringing and was just a strong male figure in your life. Um, I did read though at when you were young, and you kind of mentioned this too, when you were in your young teen years, that you had this perception of him as almost being mean, and that you didn't quite have that respect yet, or that appreciation for the role that he was playing. So how did that change with you and your relationship with your dad, from kind of what was your perspective on his presence in your life when you were young, before you had really matured to where it's at now?
Well, I think one of the things that dawned on me first is when I was young, my dad was not like the other dads. So,
Mm,
for example, like we had to be home for dinner every night. It was like annoying. Where the other kids were still out playing. We were not allowed to go out on Sundays. Sundays was family day, the day for God. So we stayed home, which was annoying. I want to go out. I want to go play. Certain things like, you know, we didn't have cable TV. You know, back then there were no, you know, there was no internet. So
mhm,
it was like you either had 5 channels or you had 500 channels, and we had 5.
mhm.
So, and you know, there are a couple of things like that. You know, my dad spanked us, right? I mean, in this world today, you call that a child abuse, but my dad had no problem pulling out the belt and giving us an ass when we needed it, and preaching to us. And you know, my dad was tough. And like I said, I recognize the contrast between my father and the other fathers. And I used to wonder, like, why? I mean, like, David's dad doesn't do that.
Mhm.
Michael's dad doesn't do that. What is wrong with my dad? I wish I didn't have this guy just getting in my way. Well, as I got older and I started to see what the other young men became as a result of having weak fathers or absent fathers, and what I, by the grace of God, both having a father, but also grace in my life to become who I am today, I attributed a lot of it, especially since having my own children, I can see how important fatherhood is, that it is a direct reflection of the fact that I had a strong alpha male father in my home.
Mm.
I was able to achieve, you know, much of what I was able to achieve in this life.
Is there anything that you look back on that you're doing differently than how he approached it as a dad? Or do you feel like you're modeling a lot of what you learned it from his example?
Well, my dad raised 3 boys.
Mm,
I'm raising 3 girls. So the
big
rules,
difference.
right, they're a little different. I started out trying to be like my dad was with us, and I realized very quickly, okay, this is not going to work with the girls. So yeah, there are things that I do differently, obviously, and there's a different time.
Mhm.
You know, for example, like I said, we didn't even have cable TV, but here I am living in this world where, you know, each of my children have screens. And so I have to create boundaries around something that I didn't even know was going to exist, right? There's
Sure.
iPads and stuff.
It's a
And
lot
so
easier when it's just 5 channels versus 500, and that's the the only decision
one
on the
TV,
screen. Yeah.
right? We had one TV. And so you know, I'm sure raising children is tough in no matter what time and environment, but the challenges are different for sure.
Mhm. And so you have 3 daughters and 1 son. So do you feel is the difference in your parenting approach between the girls, and then now the boy, who's obviously the youngest, so maybe not quite as much fathering experience there yet, but are there any standout differences or notable differences in how you approach the relationships with them?
Well, they let you know,
Mm,
right? Like what might work with one is not going to work with the other. And so it's a matter of being present for that, being able to see, okay, well, you know, I thought this was going to work, but obviously it's not. The thing with girls, and you know, I'm just talking, I haven't raised any other children but my own, so I'm talking
sure.
about my girls and my son, is is the emotions, their feelings get hurt. Where my son, his feelings won't be hurt so easily. Just everything rolls off his back. He's like, oh, whatever.
Mhm.
But you know, you could say something a certain way, and the girls are like, "You're attacking me," and they take it so personally. And they learn very early on, how to produce crocodile tears. So if my son cries, there's a reason why. A lot of times my daughters cry. It's like, you're not gonna. I'm not afraid. My dad used to say this too. I'm not afraid of your tears. You can cry all you want, but I'm not changing my mind. Just because you're crying doesn't mean you're gonna get it.
Yeah.
Right? Go ahead, cry. So, but it's crocodile because they put this on, woo, and play this victim card, and then the minute they realize it's not going to work, well, that all dries up, and they're like, I gotta try something else. So they manipulate, I would say, a little differently.
I love that. Yeah. My daughter's she's just over a year old. And she already is starting to do some of that with us. she gets fussy, and then you kind of see her look at you to see if you're falling for it. And you're like, no, son of a bitch, you're so smart already. But no, we're not going down that route. So what are the values with them that you're trying to instill, you're trying to live by? And what do you find are the best ways to instill values in your family?
Values have to be practiced in
Mm-hmm.
order to become virtues. Virtues is a habit. And the one that was really instilled in me as a child, that was unique for me and is even more unique today because no one seems to do it, is manners.
Hmm.
Manners. Children just don't have manners. Uh, when you walk into someone's house, you say hello, right? Like, I'll have neighborhood kids that'll come in. And my parents used to, complain about this too. It's like, how come this kid comes over the house and he doesn't say hello? I don't know. Well, you make sure when you go to your friend's house, you say hello to their parents. If you don't see them, you go look for them. You say, hello, Mrs. Jones.
Mm.
All right. It's something simple as that. Please and thank you. Right. It's really basic. We don't have to become philosophers for creating value in our family's lives. You have to start with manners.
Mhm.
Right. That's virtue expressed: saying hello, saying goodbye, saying please, saying thank you, saying excuse me, not speaking over people, waiting your turn, you know what I'm saying? Things of that nature.
And is that more of just they learn by seeing you you display those manners and you reinforce those when you don't see them do it? Or what's your approach to ensuring that they do know manners and that is something that they're living out in their daily lives?
Well, of course they have to see you doing it, right?
Hmm.
They have to see me doing it. They have to see me and hear me saying thank you and things of nature. But I got to remind them, right? And no matter how much they see, I, I don't think them seeing me do it is enough because they'll forget.
Hmm.
So they have to be reminded. Say thank you. Say hello. You know what I'm saying?
Yep.
And this is something my dad and I, we were talking yesterday. He and I were talking about this, and he reminded me. He says, consistency is the key. He says, you got to say the same thing 1,000 times. He says, only have a handful of rules. Don't have too many rules. If you have too
Mm.
many rules, you're going to lose it. Have a handful of rules, but drill those rules over and over and over. It does not matter if they're 18 years old and you still got to tell them, you still got to tell them. And that's really it. It's just that repetition, repetition, repetition. Never get tired of saying the same thing over and over again.
Yeah. So have a short rule book, but never set it down.
Right.
So I like that. So strength has obviously been a big part of your life, from the first business that you built to your brands to kind of, it seems everything that you put out there, strength plays such a big role. What role do you think strength has in fatherhood? What do you think is kind of the place for strength when it comes to leading your family?
Well, if we're talking strength, not just physically, but we're talking moral strength and strength of character. Just what we're talking about right now. So, for example, when your daughter starts crying, and there's something that's against her will, but it's best, you got to be strong to say
Mm.
no. No, I don't care if you're crying. I don't care if you turn blue in the face. You're not going to get it. You got to be strong enough to be disliked.
Mm.
Right. And so, I wish I could say that I'm perfect. My family's perfect. We are not. And I've had to do things and say things and set boundaries in a way that I know for that moment, my child hates me.
Mm.
And I'll say it. I know you hate me right now, but I don't care. because I love you and that's why I'm doing it. So you could hate me all you want. It's not going to affect my feelings. And that doesn't come naturally. Like I don't want my children to hate me.
Mm-hmm.
Nobody wants their children to hate. I don't want my children to dislike me. But I think that's one of the biggest problems that we're having in the world today is that parents want to be liked by their children. We live in a world where authority is denigrated. Nobody wants to be under authority, and as a result, no one can be an authority. You can't be an authority if you're not under authority. It does not exist. You do not have authority unless you're under authority. And so, and you see that played out with parents because they don't want an authority. They denigrate, they hate authority. So what do they do with their children? They don't want to be an authority. I can't be an authority with this child. And so the children walk all over the parents and they're wondering why I've lost my kid.
Yeah, and I've heard it talked about. Some guests on the show have brought up the the difference between thinking about short-term success with your kids and long-term success. And sometimes if that short-term success being, oh, I want my kids to be happy in the moment. I want to give them what they need to enjoy this time right now. Long-term success thinking, what do I need to do for them, be for them, give to them, provide for them right now that's going to create success in their life 5, 10, 15 years down the road when I'm not here. And that's
Right.
what I take from that too, having that strength, that fortitude to, not to be hated by them in the moment for their
Right.
long-term success and development. Is that
Right.
aligned with what you're saying?
Yeah, absolutely. And my dad used to say, I take a lot after my dad. That's why I'm glad that I have him. He taught me a lot about being a strong father. And he would say, he would sound like Scarface. He'd go, I'm the bad guy. I'm the bad guy. And, but later on, as I'm an adult and he and I talk about it, he laughs now and he's like, yeah, but you know what? You get over it. Like I know you hated me.
Mm-hmm.
You got over it, right? He said, remember that they'll get over it.
Yeah, that's a great way of putting it. Have there been any, in business, we always hear about how failures ultimately create growth. And sometimes some of the people we look up to, their biggest strengths came from specific challenges that they faced or perceived failures at that time. And I think that's true in all areas of life. So are there any areas specific to family and parenting where you had a challenge or perceived failure in the moment that then when you extrapolate that out and you look down the road, that actually is something you grew from and ended up translating into a strength for you?
Well, I mean, there are so many things that I did wrong,
Mm,
right? That I figured out later, and I'm like, oh, or I did with one of the older children. That by the time the younger ones got older, I was like, you ain't gonna get me with that one. And of course, as I think is with most parents, you make the most mistakes with the first kid because I don't
yeah.
know what I'm doing. I'm trying my best here, and this is the first one, so I make some mistakes. And so the one thing that I wish I would have done, it's so funny because we grew up with like one TV, 5 channels. And I kind of, when we started having children, I took to this natural childbirthing, natural parenting. I wanted to be a hippie parent, right? I was doing all the things. And this was back in like 2002. So it was like brand new.
Before it was cool.
Huh?
Before it was cool.
Right. It's catching on now.
Yeah.
Like you said yourself, your wife's not using the epidurals and all that.
Yep.
And so I had this plan not to have TVs in my house. And I didn't have a TV. I just didn't want my children to be in front of the TV. And I was going to keep a boundary on it. And then I brought the iPads in. I don't know what I was thinking, because we didn't grow up with them. And I really didn't have any conception for it. And I had just gotten my first iPhone because, they're new. They really are new. Mm-hmm. It's not something that we've got lots of experience with and we got many generations of dealing with this thing. And here are the best practices. It was none of that.
Sure.
And so I really thought I was being a good dad by bringing the screens in. And it was literally like bringing Satan into your home because there were fights and there were battles. I believe that there were times my children were under some kind of demonic oppression. They would scream and throw temper tantrums and get so angry because of the screen that they wouldn't get that angry about anything else,
Mm.
dessert or, dumb things that kids like, toys. No, but the screens turn them into monsters. And so I wish I would have held off on that a lot longer.
Mm. So where kind of how's that played out? Where did or what rules ended up being in place for having screens integrated into your family life in a way that was still acceptable and aligned with your values?
Well, first, you got to talk to them about what they're going to see,
Hmm.
because they're going to see everything and they want to see everything. And you can't assume that they're not.
Right.
So I had to start talking with my children about pornography very early,
Hmm.
right? It's not like a conversation you want to have until like maybe they're teenagers, but you can't do that any longer. So there's that. I mean, and then there's all the diabolical disorientation of the world that's associated with what they're getting through the social media. I never thought in my life that I would have to have a conversation with my children that boys have penises and girls have vaginas. I mean, when you're 3, that's a conversation to have.
Hmm.
But when you're 13, I have to explain to you, no, just because you feel like a girl doesn't
Mm.
make you a girl. Just you feel like a boy. The world is really trying to confuse the children, and they do it through so many different mediums. But this one is very insidious.
Hmm.
And I would even have my children like call me like Dad, you're being like a racist or bigoted or something like that. Like, no, I'm being real. It doesn't matter what the world tells you. There are certain things that are wrong, and there are certain things that are right. And so it's the conversations. I have to talk to them about things. I tell them all kinds of things that they'll laugh at me right now, and you might even laugh at me, but you'll see where I'm going with it. I'll say things like, robots are not people. Robots are not people. Do not forget that, my children, because there's coming a time when AI is going to want to have rights. They're going to want to give them rights. I would say even more ridiculous that people are not food. It doesn't matter if they're doing cannibalism in the history museum, and that they're showing blood in the mouth and teeth, in some of these crazy commercials and music videos. Like, people are not food. So I have to have the hard but the weird conversations with them,
Yeah.
right? And there's so many of them, so I am constantly having to combat the errors that they're receiving from the world, right? And that's like playing whack-a-mole. It's like boom, boom, boom. It's not one thing, it's enough. So it's like I can't relent on that. I have to, even if it hasn't come up because of them, if I see it out there, I say, hey, what do you guys think about this? And I
Hmm.
get their feeling for it, and then I say, okay, well, this is what it really is. And sometimes they agree with me, sometimes they don't, because the world has been turned against their parents. And I understand that the children are turned just like I was turned against my father. And so there's the conversations. That's number one. But you got to use filters. You got to use filters. You got to have the Wi-Fi filters. You got to, like, we use Verizon, and we go into the back end and we block all the websites. And there's that. I'm going to start now that my children are getting older. They're especially my 2 oldest girls. 16 and 14. I have to cut off the Wi-Fi at midnight. Right? We weren't letting them sleep with they're not allowed to sleep with them. They got to bring them into our room, but sometimes they'll, oh, I forgot, right? So now I'm going to dial in the Wi-Fi so that at midnight it just shuts off, right? So you got to create filters. You got to create those shut off mechanisms. You should have the password for every single one of your kids' devices.
Mm.
There should be nothing private in there, although they want to have private stuff. And when
Right.
their mother or myself goes, hey, come bring that over here. What is your password? They like to grab it from the hand, and they'll be like, wait a second, hold on, because they want to erase something. I don't know what it is that they're trying to hide, but it's obviously
Mm.
something that I don't want. So you have to have that understanding with them that these devices belong to me, and I have the password. And the minute I ask you for it, you give it to me. You don't say wait. You hand it to me, and I get to do whatever I want with it. All right.
Yeah.
Various things like that. It's not a privilege. It's a what is it? It's not a right. It's a privilege.
Right.
It's a privilege. So I'll just take that away from you anytime I want. Right. These are the things, because even as adults, we become very attached to the device.
Hmm.
You can take a 6'6", 300-pound offensive lineman for the Chicago Bears, and you take his phone away, or you hide his phone, he's gonna freak out. He's gonna act like a big baby. Where's my phone? Like like a child who lost his binky.
Yeah. And then layer in looking to see what activity has been going on. And you got
Mhm.
a recipe for people freaking out and being scared of what you might find.
Right. Yeah.
What advice when you have new dads who reach out to you, whether it's through your channel or people that you know personally, is there one piece of advice based on what you've learned through your parenting journey that you have that you'd offer to a first time dad who's just getting started on that path?
Well, a couple things I learned. Of course, I brought up the fact that they don't need you. That's an ego trip, and that's false. Those are lies from the world.
Mm,
It's not that you could disappear, but what's really needed is you support mom. You're there, you're her support. She takes care of the kids.
mm.
Doesn't mean that you can't help, right? I've changed my fair share of diapers and stuff like that. But the point is that you don't feel guilty, because your real job is to protect and provide for the mother so that she can do the job. That's her main job. That should be her main job. That should be her number one job. And so your number one job is to help her do her job by morally and financially, just being there, helping her. You don't need to be with the kids all the time. So don't feel guilty about that. I have a lot of young dads. They're like, oh, I feel bad because I don't come home till 6 o'clock, and then the baby's only up for an hour, and then we put in. I'm like, that's fine. That's okay. The baby sees you, knows that's dada. That's good. That's fine. Um, the
Before we go,
second one,
sorry, before we go on the second one, could you just share a little bit about, from your perspective, the difference between that and not being an absent father, kind of where that boundary is? Because I know we talked about that earlier. That's a huge issue right now of absent fathers who, emotionally or physically, but where does that come into play? Between that, where you don't need to be there, but you can't be an absent father. What's the difference in your mind between those two?
well, you break down a little bit. I
Oh,
think you're frozen. I
sorry.
think I have a
Looks like I froze there
unset
for a
connection. Oh,
second.
there we
Got me back?
go. Okay, we're back.
All right.
Right. So absent fathers usually, number one, aren't married to the mother, right? So if you want to nail the difference here,
Yeah.
it's marry the child's mother, be
Mhm.
an actual dad, be an actual husband,
Mm.
actually be there. Uh, when you're not there, you're not hanging out with your friends, you're not drinking at the bar, you're working, you're doing what needs to be done in order to provide for them. And this can last up until, I think, about preteen. Once they turn about 10, 12, between age 10 and 12, this can change a little bit, but you don't need to be there for every soccer game,
Mm.
right? If you got to work, don't feel guilty about it when they're young. They're not, it's not that important. So, an an absent father is a completely different thing than a father that's actively working, a guy that's providing from the outside. Um, yeah, they're just two totally different things. I'm trying to think about what else, the difference between absent father is absent. You're not absent. You're not absent. You're there. You're very much there. Also, like, again, it really has to do with the relationship with the mother
Mhm.
at that start of that start phase of the child's life, because the mother teaches the child how the father is. The way the mother relates to the father is how the child is going to relate to the father.
Mm.
If the mother if the parents ignore one another, right, and the mother it kind of ignores the father or has no respect for the father, the child is not going to have respect for the father. If the mother speaks highly of the father, if the mother talks about the father, hey, daddy will be home, and your daddy did this for you, and daddy loves you, that's how the child receives you when you're quote unquote absent. I remember when I was working real hard and I wasn't really there very often, Colleen would have the children draw things for me. So there was always a gift. Of course, I received the gift when I came home, but the gift was that they received me while I was outside the home, because the mother was saying, draw this for your dad, and this is what daddy likes. And when daddy comes, we're going to go to the door and we're going to greet him. So I think that's important too, because you could be doing the best that you can, but you're going to be absent in your child's heart if you're absent on your wife's tongue.
Mm. So being there, I liked what you said earlier too about being there, to your role being really supporting your wife in that journey, as you know, as she's being a mother and becoming a mother. I think that's important as well. So sorry, I cut you off from number 2 of advice to dads, young dads, but I just wanted to clarify on that and get your perspective. So appreciate it.
Again, it goes back. The second thing, as with the first, I think what's really important is what's happening between men and women, mothers and fathers, husbands and wives today. That's where the destruction of the family is happening. That's where the strong bond of the family is going to happen. We live in a world where they put children on the pedestal. It's all about the children. The whole marriage is all about the children. Everything that they do, everything they buy, everything they talk about, it's all about the children. And I think that's ass backwards. It's about the relationship with your wife. It's about the relationship between the parents. And then the children, the love flows down to them. But what a lot of people do is they try to, especially individually, right? They don't even bond together. They try to lift the children up. They try to flow the love up. It doesn't work that way. It's mom and dad, and then children, and then the love flows down to the children. That's so key. The best way you can love your children is to love your wife. There's no question about that. And the same thing for a woman. The best way you can love your children is to love and respect their father. They'll see that, and they will receive their father. You could have a father in the home and the children still won't receive him because the mother doesn't receive and produce the father for the children to. So the second thing has to do with that as well. And that was something that I didn't know was coming. And I just wish somebody would kind of like warn me when my wife had our first child, right? Like she and I, we were together all through high school, all through college. She and I, it was just she and me. And we were, and she and I are very affectionate. And we were just like bonded together all the time. We love spending time with each other. And when she got pregnant, and up until when the baby came, and maybe even like a year or more into that, she was absent in a way. There was less she and I, and there was more her and the baby a lot of times. I'm talking about in terms of, time and quality time, and just, sometimes my needs would come secondary because it's like, oh, the baby's shitting and throwing up all over the place. It's like, it doesn't matter, if dinner is a little bit late on the table, right? So one of the things I wish somebody would have told me is that, your wife has to go in for a little while. She needs to cultivate that relationship with the baby, but it doesn't mean that she's not coming back. And so as the wife takes that journey, the woman becomes a totally different woman when she starts having babies. And there will be a moment when she will come full circle, except it'll be a brand new woman. She'll be a much more mature woman. She'll just be a much more evolved woman. She's no longer just a woman. She's a mother. So I'm just saying that I wish somebody would have told me that it's important to afford that grace to your wife, to really embrace and fulfill her role as a mother, while you step back and let that be, and not be afraid that, this is the way it's going to be from now on. That's not. She's going to come full circle, and it's going to be an evolution of the relationship, and it's going to be great.
Yeah, no, that's great advice. I think young dads will be benefit from hearing all 3 of those things. So Elliott, for people who are listening to this, they haven't checked you out, they don't follow you currently, where would you point them to learn more about what you've got going on, the content you put out in the world, all your different businesses? Is there anywhere you'd point them to check you out?
Yeah, so I've been uploading my coaching sessions with my students to my Elliott Hulse YouTube channel. I have 2 YouTube channels of Strength Camp and Elliott Hulse, but I haven't uploaded to the strength training one for a while, and it's just been a lot of these types of conversations that I have with the guys in my program, and so I'm there, and almost daily, and then also on Instagram at elliottHulse.com, and if you're interested in my coaching program, just look for my offers, because that's usually where I put them on Instagram. And if I ask you to message me the word king, that means, you have an opportunity to apply and see if it's a good fit for you to join me in my like-minded group of men, where we're growing stronger as fathers, as leaders, and doing the best that we can in this disoriented age.
That's awesome. Well, we'll have that all linked up. And I appreciate, Elliot, you carving out some time to come on the show. Honor to meet you, and pleasure talking fatherhood with you, brother.
You got it, Brad. Thank you for having me, dude.